I live next to a haunted house, 3 unbelievable neighbor horror stories that will terrify you. I never should have opened that door. The very thought sends chills racing down my spine. It was just another Tuesday. I was coasting through my usual routine, lost in the hum of everyday life. Coffee brewing, soft music playing, then came the first shiver. The wind howled outside, as if the universe itself was warning me. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across my living room. A creeping darkness filled the corners, whispering secrets I couldn't grasp. Across the street, the old Wilkins house loomed, plastered with peeling paint and overgrown weeds. A sinister presence, it had stood empty for years. The stories swirled in the neighborhood like autumn leaves, lights flickering, ghostly figures seen through the grimy windows, strange noises echoing in the night. I laughed them off until that fateful evening that I was washing dishes when I heard Ida's soft tap, tap, tapping against the window. My heart raced. It was too dark outside. I turned off the soapy water, straining to listen. The tapping grew frantic, like fingernails scraping on the glass. I glanced toward the Wilkins house. Only shadows. Just shadows, but then, I heard something else. A low moan, growing louder, seeping through the walls, crawling into my ears. It was a painful wail that made my skin prickle. I rushed to the window, breath hitching. An old figure stood there, half hidden, swaying in the cold air. My stomach twisted. It was just a fleeting shape, but it seemed to call to me that I forced myself to retreat, but my curiosity tugged at my feet. I stepped closer to the door. I should have locked it. The house felt alive around me, creaking and sighing. Moments stretched like elastic. I could feel the pulse of fear, then came the crash. Something fell upstairs. My body froze. Goosebumps riddled my arms. I had to know what was happening. I realized I wasn't alone. I felt it, a presence breathing down my neck. It took everything in me to open that door. My heart thundered in my chest, pounding like a drum as I crossed the threshold. The air turned icy, wrapping around me like a fog. I stepped outside, drawn toward the darkness. The Wilkins house towered over me, its hollow windows glaring like empty sockets. A shadow wavered, darting just beyond the corner of my vision. Was I losing my mind? Or was something truly there? A whisper grazed my ear. Hush, silent. I spun around as panic gripped me, but there was nothing. Just the oppressive silence, broken only by my pounding heart. That's when it happened. A movement. Something darted across the window. In an instant, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun back and gasped, breathing in a rush of frost. The figure appeared, emerging from the dark. I could scarcely breathe. What was it? A face twisted in agony, eyes staring straight through me, and then I screamed. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The scream echoed back at me, amplified by the night. Like a siren's wail, it pierced through the darkness, a blood-curdling sound filled with desperation. The figure in the window, ghastly and pale, continued to sway in that sickening rhythm, a puppeteer's puppet with broken strings. It wasn't just a face, it was a mask of sorrow, twisted in anguish as if each wrinkle and crease told of a lost lifetime. That I stumbled back, heart racing, my breaths shallow and rapid. But the figure leaned closer, as if trying to press its cold, clammy hand against the glass, yearning for something beyond my comprehension. I wanted to flee, to run from the suffocating despair pouring from those hollow eyes, but my body refused to obey. Another crash erupted, this time from deep within the house itself. It reverberated with an unnatural force, followed by a mandatory silence suffused with tension. The door at my back was a fortress, but the Wyken house held promises of nightmares that could no longer be contained. My curiosity clawed at my mind and pushed against the stone-cold dread wrapping around my chest. The memories of the neighborhood whispers flowed back about the horror that had taken residence there before I arrived. Unfulfilled lives, unspeakable tragedies, and a shadow that sprawled endlessly between the cracked walls. But those voices had long since faded into the mundane, brushed off as urban legends. Here I was, staring at a specter. The moaning was back, weaving around my ankles, a spectral tether that I could feel eat a wave of cold, wrapping around my legs and creeping up my spine, brushy and stagnant like fog. The figure remained motionless, but I felt another presence shift behind me. My heart skipped a beat, the air turned still as if time had held its breath. The world outside morphed into a muted canvas of fear and uncertainty, and then, the latch on the Wilkins house door rattled violently. My adrenaline surged, propelling me back toward the threshold I had crossed moments ago. But I stopped, instinct drew me back. If the barrier between our world and that house had already been violated, then surely it was too late to look away now. Help me, a voice rasped, hushed and agonizing, emerging from that open Duran invitation, a warning, filled with pain. The figure swayed slowly, like it was trying to convey a message or lead me into its ruined world. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, the weight of sorrow overwhelming me. After a moment's hesitation, I took a step forward, hopelessly drawn to the allure of the unknown as if my own heartbeat was sinking with the wails that filled the air. The instinct to run was replaced with a longing to understand, to peer into the darkness and uncover the stories buried underneath decades of dust and despair. Then, with a deafening clang, the door swung open, revealing an abyss that beckoned me. Shadows spilled out with a life of their own, slithering toward me. A pungent, rotting stench wafted into my nostrils, making me gag. Something was wrong, not just wrong, but unspeakably vile. Within that gaping mouth of darkness, I felt eyes watching me, a multitude of them unfathomable and relentless. I turned to flee, but a hand clasped my wrist with exquisite pain. It wasn't cold, it was fire and ice, an overwhelming mix that violated the normalcy of human touch. "Stay," it whispered. The voice was neither male nor female, but resonated in a guttural tone that chilled my bones. The grip tightened, and I felt myself being pulled. My vision blurred, and all I could see were those anguished eyes searching mine, the weight of eternity behind their gaze. As I struggled, the world fractured around me. The walls of the Wilkins house began to ripple, shifting as if the very fabric of reality was coming undone. A low growl vibrated through the air, a dreadful promise that whatever lay beyond that threshold was hungry for more than just a glimpse of life. With a surge of sheer terror, I freed myself from its grasp, stumbling backward. I could almost taste the madness, feel it crawling beneath my skin, urging me to succumb. But in my flight, my foot caught against something buried in the dirt. I looked down, and the realization struck as I tumbled forward. Bones, brittle and white, spilled out from the darkness of the Wilkins house, some still clinging to shards of flesh. As I braced myself against the side of my own house, gasping and dizzy, the door creaked, opening wider. The moaning crescendoed into an agonizing choir, a cacophony of the lost pleading to be found. I was going to die in this nightmare. But worse still, I realized that I had left the doorway open. A rush of hurried footsteps echoed behind me. I turned my head, dread pooling in my stomach. My heart sank. Was it someone coming to help me, or to pull me further into the abyss? Then I saw it, bright and smooth in the expanse of the night, a figure darting toward me, a child, arms stretched out wide as if to embrace the madness. There was something very familiar about that face, and dread filled my veins as recognition washed over me. It was my own reflection, marred and twisted, grinning back with malicious glee as it surged forward through the shadow. "Let's play," it whispered, mirroring my fear with that haunting smile. The reflection loomed closer, and for a moment, I felt a chilling symbiosis between us, as if the darkness had birthed a doppelganger, intent on dragging me into the turmoil that roiled just behind its eyes. "Let's play," it said again, a whisper turned sneer, something far from the innocent invite of a child. It was a call to arms in a battle I didn't even know I was fighting. That I stumbled backward, gasping for air as panic clawed at my throat. No. Get away from me. My voice rang out, thick with desperation and dread. The chill that spread from my spine deepened, it pooled in my gut, knotting with the realization that the deeper I ventured into this haunting, the more lost I became. The shadows whispered around me, growing bolder, stretching their fingers towards my skin, pulsing with an energy that felt both alive and dead. They danced around the edges of my vision, taunting me with echoing laughter of children twisted by pain. The doppelganger stopped short, eyes gleaming with a perfect wickedness, echoes of its otherworldly laughter spiking the night. Why do you run from me? It chided, tilting its head, an uncanny mimicry of innocence. Panic ignited, urging me to flee, but my feet remained rooted in disbelief. It was me, it looked like me. I could see the smudge of dirt on its cheek, the wildness in its hair, the sparkle of something sinister sparkling in its gaze. Suddenly, the wall of my house shivered. Just beyond its threshold, the night grew thick with whispers, like 1,000 phantoms in a barrage of promises. A chorus of voices flickered and collided, advancing toward me like a wave of despair. Join us, they beckoned, sweet and serpentine, as the specter's laughter rang again, awakening something deep in the crevices of my mind. Images blasted across my thoughts, a memory of playing as a child, sticky-fingered and wide-eyed, lost in laughter and shadow games. But this seemed wrong, it felt inverted, twisted by a horror I couldn't articulate. Every nerve screamed for me to run, yet the air thickened, binding me to the moment as the doppelganger stepped closer. With a sudden spark of clarity, my instincts kicked in as if they were a lifeline thrown to a drowning soul. Stay away from me. I shouted, framing the words with an explosive rage that propelled me forward. But rather than retreating, it moved toward me with an almost hypnotic ease, eyes fixated on my every twitch. Why stay away? You're my favorite game, it taunted, elongating the words, twisting them into a sinister melody that clawed at my psyche. The shadows that had danced around me crawled upward, weaving through the contours of my surroundings, melding with the pulsating dread that resonated from the Wilkins house. Before I could process the implications, I felt something sharp pierce through me. A spear of ice shot through my chest, locking me in place, as I realized the shadows were no longer mere playthings, but tethering connections that stretched far beyond physical reach. I could sense it now. The malevolence brewed in the confines of the house suffocated the very air that I breathed. I tore my gaze away from my ravenous reflection and turned instinctively toward the darkness of the Wilkins house, pooling with anticipation. In the dim recess, the figure still swayed, the wails blending with the churning laughter around me. There was a choice to be made: stand and face my doppelganger or flee into the clutches of whatever horrors lay behind those walls. Then the ground beneath me began to tremble, soft at first, like the muted heartbeat of a slumbering beast awakening. The very fabric of reality seemed to undulate, swirling with despair and grotesque potential, and through the roiling chaos, another voice emerged, primal and deep. Come home, it hummed, ringing with the resonance of hopelessness, a sound akin to a long-lost parent calling for their child. My heart raced again, pounding against my ribs. I glanced back at the doppelganger, now grinning wider as its face began to distort and ripple, melding into the shadows that licked at my ankles. It was the very essence of fear, each contortion chipping away at my will, taunting me to give in, to succumb to the darkness enveloping the world around me. Join us, the voice twisted together, now a multitude echoing through the house and mixing with the guttural growl vibrating in my chest. In a moment of sheer instinct, I closed my eyes, summoning all the resolve I had left. I stepped forward, trembling yet resolute, wanting to reclaim my fate from this unholy resonance. But just as I did, the doppelganger surged, its limbs extended grotesquely, elongated, reaching for me with an insatiable hunger, threatening to engulf my very existence. Playtime's just begun, it crooned, and that instant shattered, splintering the air as the weight of everything crashing wall fell upon me, a climax of all the dread woven tightly through reality. And then, just like that, I was engulfed in darkness, falling, slipping away from the world I knew, pulled by a scream that echoed louder than the howling wind, resonating with my very essence as the shadows cloaked my soul. The world around me faded, but something else stirred. Something within the darkness yearned to be set free. Pinned by that echoing scream, I could scarcely comprehend what was to come, but I knew I was no longer alone. What rose next from the murky depths was not just a call to play, but a descent into a nightmare from which there was no waking. My body felt weightless as I plunged into the obscurity, swallowed by the darkness that clung to me like a living shroud. Time lost all meaning in the murky void, moments stretched into eternity, and I could hear the whispers crawling over my skin like cold fingers. They were familiar yet distorted, fragments of childhood lullabies mingled with sinister verses, echoing in a symphony of despair. Each note resonated with a haunting melody that sent shivers racing down my spine. I fell through the very fabric of reality, lost in a cacophony of shadowy memories, each distorted by a lens of anguish that warped their innocence. I saw myself, a child again, laughing and leaping through the dim glow of twilight, but the laughter morphed into sobs, twisted faces peeking through the jagged edges of my memory, mouths gaping in silent screams that drowned out all light. Then it struck meth connection. I was being dragged into the depths of the Wilkins house, caught in the web of its torment, drawn closer to the source of its agonizing whispers. I gasped in realization, struggling against the tumultuous tide that sought to drown me. I had been ensnared not merely by a reflection or an altered version of myself, but by the very essence of the house and all its cursed souls. "Come home, come play," came that dreadful chorus again, now palpable and suffocating. Fear clawed at my throat, choking me as specters swirled around, their hollow eyes reflecting endless suffering. I felt them, their icy touch, cold and desperate, pulling at the edges of my consciousness, like moths to a dying flame. Panic surged anew as I grasped futilely for something solid, anything to anchor me to the surface. I felt a tug at my soul, a compulsion to surrender, to join them in their eternal torment. No. This wasn't my home, it couldn't be. I had to pull myself free. Suddenly, the blackness pulsed rhythmically, as if it were breathing, and shadows flickered in and out, arrays of faces morphing with the darkness, crying out in a language I couldn't comprehend. But amid the chaos, a single familiar face emerged from the swirl, of face that bore a painful resemblance to my own. My doppelganger, now grinning from ear to ear, its sharp teeth nearly bursting forth from its flesh, a fountain of malice and delight, radiating a sinister warmth. "Where's the fun in running away?" it mocked, its voice the very sound of rusted metal dragged across the ground, slicing through the air with intent. It toyed with the shadows surrounding us, weaving them into grotesque forms that mimicked our every move, creating a grotesque dance of betrayal and fear. "Join us," it beckoned, extending a hand that dripped with darkness, poised to pull me into its abyss. "You know you want to play." The darkness around pulsed. It was no longer just a void, but an entity of its own, alive and breathing, steeped in malice and despair. I felt my heart race. This was no longer just a game. The stakes were far more terrible than I had ever imagined. "Stop!" I screamed, though my voice was swallowed by the churning shadows, barely a whisper against a cyclone of anguish that spiraled around me. I fought with every fiber of my being, channeling the warmth of my own memories, fighting against the bitter cold that tried to resonate deep within my soul, yet each surge of strength felt feeble against the malevolent influence squeezing the very essence out of me. I clutched my head, trying to stave off the overwhelming sorrow that threatened to consume me. Faces twisted, haunted faces flashed across my mind as I fought against its vile influence, desperate to break free from the grasp of the house that had turned into a labyrinth of despair, but the shadows only grew thicker, and I could hear the cries of those ensnared in the house, voices lost to time, begging for release, echoing through eternity. I could see them now, a nexus of tortured souls, trapped, timeless figures suspended in agony. Then, in a sudden shudder, the floor beneath me gave way, collapsing beneath the weight of our entwined destinies. I fell yet again, deeper into that abyss, heart pounding in my chest as I plunged through an opening into what seemed like a cellar. The place was dank and stifling, a forgotten tomb filled with the scent of rot and despair. That I landed on something soft yet unyielding, a thick carpet of dust layered over what felt like remnants of lives long extinguished. A flicker of movement caught my eye, drawing me into its depths, a child's shoe, dusty, abandoned, as it rolled eerily toward me, stopping inches from my trembling hand. I dared not touch it, a shiver of horror coursing through my veins as the realization washed over me. I was not alone, there were more remnants, mementos that thrived in this crypt of despair. Just as I began to brace myself against absolute despair, a familiar giggle echoed through the cellar, sweet and haunting, tantalizing and beckoning into the corners where light dared not wander. "Play with us," it chimed, and the darkness shifted around me, drawing closer, as I knew with burgeoning dread that this place was far worse than I had ever feared. In that moment, just as I started to rise, to run, I heard it, a low growl echoing out from the shadows, a sound that would haunt my dreams for an eternity. "Welcome home," it snarled, as a wretched presence loomed behind me, ready to pull me back into its gaping maw. The walls of the cellar shook with a deafening roar that drowned out my scream, and as I turned to face my doom, the world around me splintered into chaos, pulsating darkness threatening to swallow me whole. The growl reverberated like thunder, shaking the very foundations of my mind as I stumbled backward, the dust clouding around me becoming a suffocating fog. I squinted into the dim light, scanning the oppressive corners of the cellar for the source of that horrific sound. Shadows writhed and shifted as if mocking my terror, alive with the darkness that seeped from the cracks in the walls like dripping venom. The child's shoe, that ghastly symbol of innocence lost, seemed to thrum with an unseen energy, as if it were a marker for something far worse. The giggle echoed again, a sound so wrong, it twisted my insides into knots. "Play with us," it taunted, tinkling like wind chimes caught in a storm. The voice was light, yet it dripped with a sinister undertone, curling into my ears like smoke, filling my lungs with dread that I pressed my back against the cool stone wall, feeling the roughness scrape against my skin, grounding me just long enough to muster the courage to face whatever hunted me. Each breath became a laborious effort, the air heavy with decay and the scent of forgotten memories. I could hear fragments of stories whispered through the gloom, lost loves, shattered dreams, and desperate pleas that had become eternally entangled in the dark tendrils of the house. The growl shifted closer. It was a low, guttural sound that resonated within the very marrow of my bones, and I felt raw panic claw at my heart. I had to move, I had to escape, but as I turned to flee, something gripped my ankle, icy fingers coiling around me like a serpent, pulling me back into the depths of horror. My heart pounded against my ribcage like a trapped animal as I stumbled, losing my footing and crashing to the floor. In that instant of vulnerability, the laughter erupted into a raucous chorus echoing around me, swirling like the fog that closed in, a maelstrom of voices all beckoning me into the depths. I was enveloped in darkness as the weight of despair pressed upon me, numbing my limbs. "Stay and play forever," they sang, a haunting lullaby that curdled the blood in my veins. Faces flickered into existence, delighted in my anguish, their eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger. They reached out, claw-like hands stretching toward me, whispering promises of eternal joy mingled with eternal pain. That in a fit of rage, I gasped out a prayer. "Get away from me." The words felt faint and fragile, lost against the cacophony of torment. But it ignited something within me. An ember of defiance surged, forcing me to wrestle free from those icy grips. Thrashing wildly, for a moment, time stood still as I found strength in survival instinct. I propelled myself away, feeling the fingers loosening their grasp. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing, panic blurring the edges of my vision, but the shadows, emboldened by my moment of weakness, surged forward. They morphed into grotesque shapes, each one a face twisted with rage and sorrow, clawing towards me with unspeakable fury. They shouted my name, a terrible choir of anguish. "You belong to us now. This is your legacy." Then, within the blackness, I spotted a glimmer, a sliver of light slicing through the gloom. My instinct screamed it might was the way out. Desperation lent me speed as I bolted, plunging toward the beacon, crashing through the chaos that tried to ensnare me, ducking low beneath the grasping shadows swarming in my wake. The light flickered and pulsated, teasing my desperate escape. As I barreled toward it, shapes continued to swarm around me, their laughter rising like the tide, drowning out all reason. "Stay. You cannot escape what you are." But I couldn't be contained, not now. Not ever. With a mighty leap, I lunged toward the light, hoping against hope it would lead me to salvation. For an agonizing heartbeat, I felt warmth flutter through me, almost a promise of peace. But in that instant, as I approached the threshold, a hand shot out from the shadows, seizing my wrist with an iron grip. "Your home is where the darkness cradles you. The voice was both familiar and horrifying, the same mockery that had taunted me before, now filled with triumph. I twisted in panic, but the grip tightened, dragging me back towards the malevolent presence. And that's when reality tore asunder. The cellar trembled violently as shadows coalesced around me, merging into a towering figure of pure dread. As it leaned closer, its breath, a foul miasma, washed over me. "Welcome back," it whispered, as thousands of voices joined together in a discordant symphony, echoing my name and my past, plunging me into the heart of my own darkness. The floor gave way beneath my feet, a chasm of shadows opening wide, and I plunged into the infinite void below. The last thing I heard was the anguished cries of those I once loved, and the chilling question reverberating through the abyss, "Do you remember us now?" And then everything went black. I awoke gasping, not sure whether I had truly emerged from that hellish void or if I had merely slipped into another layer of it. The air was thick and stifling, an oppressive blanket that smothered any thoughts of reprieve. It was silent now, the chaos replaced by an unsettling quiet that clawed at my sanity. I forced my eyes open, and the sickening realization hit me like a physical blow that I was no longer in the cellar. Instead, I lay sprawled upon a damp, moss-covered floor of a long-abandoned room, sunlight filtering through cracks in decaying wooden beams above. The unsettling light seemed to dance, even as shadows clung to the walls, casting frightening shapes that writhed and shifted with a mind of their own. The air was laden with the scent of rot and mildew, and in a sickening twist of fate, it felt both familiar and wrong that I clambered to my feet, trembling as I surveyed my surroundings. This room bore the marks of something grotesque. Shattered furniture lay like discarded skeletons, and remnants of shattered dreams littered the ground. An ancient mirror hung crookedly on the wall, its surface marred and cracked, hinting at a dark past. I approached it hesitantly, remembering too well the way the darkness had harbored secrets. As I gazed into the glass, a ripple of movement caught my eye. The reflection didn't show me alone. There beside me stood a girl, her back turned, hair cascading down like shadows alive. "Help us," she whispered, her voice soft, almost like a breeze that carries the voice of forgotten children. I couldn't help but inch closer, my heart racing. My pulse thundered in my ears as I reached out, fingertips grazing the cool glass. Suddenly, the air shifted. The moment I touched the mirror, a shockwave rippled through the room. The girl's reflection turned, her face a mask of despair and torment. Her mouth stretched into a distorted scream, the sound rippling through my mind, a horrific echo of my own fear. "They will come for you," she wailed, stretching her arms towards me, begging, pleading, even as shadows swirled beneath the crack of the mirror, a dark tide rising. No. "Let me go," I shouted, pulling back instinctively. But the shadows lunged forward, threads of darkness ensnaring my ankles, tugging me toward the abyss of the mirror, its surface swirling like a tempest. I fought against the pull, but the girl's terror resonated with my own, her sorrow entwined with the tendrils grasping me, merging my soul with her plight. Then I noticed something at the corners of my vision, figures emerging from deeper shadows, stumbling forth like marionettes, their limbs jerky and unnatural. Their faces were gaunt, desolate, alive with the wrongness of an existence trapped between worlds. They reached out, eyes hollow, mouths moving silently, their life force pulling from the very essence of my being. "Come play." They giggled in mirthless unison, each phantom child echoing that dreadful chorus, their sounds mingling with the girl's desperate cries. I could almost see their eyes flicker in the dim light, aware of the torment they collectively sought to inflict. I backpedaled, heart racing, but the shadows flowed with relentless intent, spilling from the walls like ink and water. Just as my mind began to fray, I felt a surge of resolve. Something latent within me flickered to life, igniting a fire in my spirit. "You won't take me!" I screamed, defiance ringing in my voice, drowning out the whispers, even as I kicked at the darkness clinging to me. With that, the atmosphere erupted. The girlish figure screamed, her face warping further, transforming into the apparition of sorrow, fury blazing in her vacant eyes. The shadows recoiled, frantic whispers spiraling into a cacophony of dread. "You think you can escape?" they hissed, growing louder, reverberating in the corners of my mind. "You are one of us," and then, as if the world itself were subject to my will, the mirror shattered with a violent crash. Jagged pieces flew outward like shards of memory, and I stumbled back in horror, narrowly avoiding their lethal path. I watched in disbelief as the shadows writhed more frantically, absorbed by the darkness that had formed in the center of the room, swirling together like a storm about to unleash its fury, but the splintered mirror revealed more than escape, it reflected layers of torment, each shard capturing a broken moment of my life, a flicker of haunting memories, until the images became just as real as the darkness itself. Visions of those I had lost, faces twisted in horror rippled through the glass, calling to me, begging me to join them in their endless dance of despair. With a final twist of fate, the remnants of the mirror floated toward me, a jagged dagger of glass lingering in the air at choice. I could feel the darkness vibrating at my back, threatening to swallow both me and my past as the figures wailed their desperate lullaby. "Join us!" they cried, a cacophony of voices sealing my fate. I grasped the dagger, its edge biting into my palm, pondering the terrifying choice before me: confront the haunted memories or surrender to the inexorable darkness that had haunted me for what felt like a lifetime. Then, the darkness surged, closing in around me, shadows eager to engulf yet another soul. As I stood, frozen in the clutches of that impending doom, the echoing laughter morphed into a deafening roar: "Remember your choice, for it may be your last." And just as the shadows began to engulf me once more, the mirror's shards glimmered ominously, revealing a flicker of hope or perhaps a new horror laying in wait. I was left questioning which choice I would ultimately make. The cacophony of shadows enveloped me with an icy grip, a harsh contrast against the warmth of the sun filtering through the cracks above. My heart pounded erratically, each thump reminding me of the urgency of my predicament. Clutching the jagged piece of glass in my hand, I forced my gaze back to the spectral figures, those hollow eyes, those contorted faces. They drew nearer, a tide of despair lapping voraciously at my sanity. In that moment of dizzy fear, I remembered the girl by the mirror, her distorted scream echoing through my mind like a knife cutting through the fabric of our reality. "Help us!" It was an anguished plea, a tether binding her soul to this forsaken place. What had once incited only fear now ignited a flame of instinctual empathy within me. "Why don't you leave?" I asked the figures, my voice trembling yet laced with faltering hope. "Why are you still here?" They didn't respond with words, but the urgency of their motions quickened, a frenzied dance of lost spirits as they circled me tighter, like predators zeroing in on their prey. I could feel their desperation clawing at my essence, and deep down a terrible recognition crept into my consciousness. This place was not merely haunted, it was a graveyard of souls, their echoes tangled in an insatiable quest for freedom. As I turned to the nearest shard of the shattered mirror, I caught a glimpse of my reflection superimposed with the girl's face, a haunting frame of intertwined fates. My heart dropped as she mouthed the silent words, "Choose." Each choice imposed unavoidable consequences. The glass dagger felt warm and pulsed with an odd energy, almost alive. It promised a release from the suffocating shadows, yet it also whispered of its own malevolence. I could either plunge it into the heart of the shadow storm before me, risking unknown repercussions, or allow it to sever the last ties binding me to my memories, perhaps releasing the tortured souls trapped within. But something else shifted in the room. A presentia chill that crept along the walls, the air thickening as something ancient and sinister groaned beneath the layers of despair. I could feel its dread-filled gaze trained upon me, the darkness warbled with desires both forbidden and intoxicating. A voice rasped from the shadows, an abyssal sound that promised knowledge and understanding if I embraced it. "Join us, and become one with the eternity of the forsaken." The voice beckoned, slithering through the silence like smoke curling around a flame. It made the hairs on my arms stand at attention, the allure of belonging amidst the chaos pressing against my psyche. No. I shouted into the void, the instinctive terror igniting a spark of clarity. The voice wavered, displacing the shadows. I could not let my fear drown out my will. Instead, I lifted the shard, drawing upon the flickering courage deep within. "I will not join you. I will not be your plaything." The darkness recoiled, whispering in 1,000 dying breaths, "You think you can resist? You already belong." As if in response to my defiance, the rumbling from the walls increased, sending vibrations through the ground beneath my feet. The air thickened as swathes of shadows darted past, and waves of sorrow threatened to drown me once more. Desperation surged through my veins, and with a primal scream, I hurtled the glass shard toward the spectral storm encroaching on me. I choose. Time seemed to stretch, dissolving into a timeless void as the jagged shard struck against the swirling mass of darkness. An explosion of light burst forth, radiating with blinding intensity, illuminating the room in shades of white and chaos. The laughter of the figures escalated into a chorus of shrieks, twisting and contorting through the blinding brightness, their hollow eyes filled with rage. The shadows writhed, caught between their own torment and my sudden onslaught, grasping for me, clawing through the light but unable to reach me. For a fleeting moment, it felt as if the chains binding the tormented souls shattered, their terrifying figures disassembling like particles in a cosmic storm. They hovered in the space between realms, lost and yet free, while my spirit soared towards the light, but just as hope began to blossom, the engulfing darkness surged once more, coiling tightly around my ankles, an insidious force determined to pull me back into its abyssal depths. I stumbled, my body breaking the fragile barrier between realms, dizzying reality spinning chaotically around me. In that instant, a face appeared in the light, one I recognized through the fog of memories, a friend long thought lost, eyes wide with terror. "Run! They're coming back! What have you done?" Before I could respond, the world shattered again, the blinding light replaced by an earth-shattering darkness that echoed with laughter, cruel and cold. Just as I braced myself for the inevitable engulfing desolation, I caught sight of the girl from the mirror one last time, a flicker of understanding forming in her hollow gaze. The darkness swirled, and the last thing I heard was the echoing words of the vessel from the shadows, "You can never escape your choice." The laughter crashed down like thunder, plunging me into an unending abyss where hope disintegrated. The sensation of being dragged backward surged through me like a final breath lost, a haunting scream rippling into the void, leaving everything at the edge of a precipice, teetering on the brink of despair. As I fell deeper into the abyss, the cacophony of laughter twisted into shrill cries, merging seamlessly with the echo of my friend's warning. The void stretched infinitely, filled with textures of anguish and despair, an unseen weight pressing against my chest that stole the breath from my lungs. I was suspended in a place without time, where moments blended into a never-ending spiral of anguish. Gradually, the darkness began to shift, warping into grotesque silhouettes that loomed ominously around me. I tried to scream, but the sound dissolved into the thick air, unheard and unwanted. The faces of the forlorn figures returned, their hollow eyes glimmering with malicious glee. They danced just out of reach, taunting me with the memory of their sorrow. It became clear, even in this abyss, they thrived, feeding off my fears, my regrets. "Why did you choose?" one of the figures whispered, its voice layered with a dozen echoes, each tinged with madness. "Now you must pay the price," the laughter returned, a malevolent chorus that slashed through the silence like a blade, each ripple a reminder of the turmoil I had unleashed. I felt the pull of their grief, it gathered within me, stirring dark pools of guilt and torment. My heart raced as I recognized the inevitable escalation of horror. I hadn't merely dislodged the souls from their chaotic cycle, I'd opened a doorway. Suddenly, I was standing once more in the dilapidated house where this all began, engulfed in a suffocating atmosphere saturated with sorrow. The light flickered feebly, revealing the warped remnants of past Lavisa child's toy lay scattered on the floor amidst broken furniture, its crackled surface echoing the innocent days gone by. I remembered how we used to laugh in the sun before this monstrous shadow had taken root within our lives. My heart pounded as I stumbled toward the mirror, cracked yet alluring, a feeble shroud separating the realms. Yet instead of my reflection, I saw a flood of spectral silhouettes behind the glass, their faces contorted in horror, mouths agape in screams that could not pierce through to my world. They thrust themselves against the glass, their anguished cries somehow reaching me as wisps of despair coiled around my consciousness. "Help us!" they cried, their voices a breathless melody of pain. "You should not have broken the seal. You must make it right." I could feel the glass vibrating under the weight of their pleas. The urge to shatter it glimmered in my mind, a chance to release them, to save myself. But a different whisper, sultry and seductive, slithered through the back of my thoughts. "Embrace the shadows. Join them. Become one with the unending night. The murmur caressed my soul, drawing me closer to darkness, urging me to surrender to the haunting lullaby of eternal despair. No. I screamed, fighting the pull of the abyss swirling within me. I grasped for something solid, but the boundary between our worlds teetered, a gossamer thread of possibility stretched taut. The house trembled in response, the echoes of its history igniting fires of anger and despair that roiled around me. Suddenly, the floor quaked violently, sending me crashing to my knees. The spectral figures behind the glass began to shift, their faces transformed into something grotesque and monstrous, eyes glimmering with unfathomable fury. They no longer looked mournful but rather hostile, vicious creatures with vengeful intent. A new darkness emerged within the house. An unseen force swept through the room, its presence more sinister than ever. A figure cloaked in billowing shadows stepped from the depths, its features hidden beneath a veil of despair. The air chilled, I could feel the promise of suffering, the calling of the damned reverberating through my bones. Your choice has invited me, it intoned, a voice like thunder echoing in the caverns of my mind. And you will join them, along with all who teeter on the edge of despair. I staggered to my feet, searching for an escape, the horrific knowledge of my actions pressing down on me like lead. As I rushed toward the door, the shadows surged forward, grasping at me with icy fingers, yanking me back into their folds. The house shook violently, and then I heard its echoes of laughter, the chorus of tortured souls rising in a crescendo, pulling me deeper into their dark invitation. My fingers brushed against the doorframe, but before I could breach the threshold, the figure lunged forward, its cold hand gripping my shoulder with a strength that defied reason. Your turn to join the darkness, it rasped. As my vision blurred and the shadows closed in, I felt something snap inside. A desperate determination. I would not become another lost soul. With one final scream, I tore away from the figure, pushing through the mass of shadows, feeling the exhilarating burn of revolt surge in my veins, but the very walls of the house began to dissolve, the fabric of reality unraveling around me. I realized I was not just fighting for my life, I was fighting against every soul that lay trapped within, their screams intertwined with my own as we spiraled into a void of immeasurable horror. Then, darkness clawed at my throat, and just as I thought I would finally succumb, a blinding light pierced through the chaos. A single voice, familiar and haunting, beckoning me from the distance. Find me. Find the truth. And as the abyss swallowed me whole, I braced for the unimaginable. What horrors awaited now, as the thin line between salvation and damnation blurred beyond recognition. Falling through the abyss was no longer a silent descent, it morphed into a cacophony of 1,000 whispers, agonized, pleading, accusatory. The fractured light that had once flickered before me twisted into grotesque patterns, illuminating swathes of distorted faces, caught in an eternal expression of despair. With each heartbeat, I felt a legion of mournful souls wrapped around me, thrumming against my skin like the pulse of a broken clock. Help us. Their voices harmonized in a twisted symphony, flooding my senses with misery. I floated through their wails until everything snapped back into an overwhelming hush. I landed not in my room, but in a hallway of the very house I thought I had left, the walls echoing with sadness and madness. Dread curled around me, thick as smoke, its tendrils winding sinuous paths across the floor. The scent of decay wafted through the air, rancid and suffocating, inciting something primal within me, a need to flee, but the door remained sealed, the windows too dark to provide an escape. It was then I heard it, a soft, eager rustling in the shadows. I pressed my back against the cool wallpaper, heart racing as the sound drew near, a wet scraping, as if fingernails were tracing a path across the wood. Come play with us, a childish voice chimed, innocent yet weighted with menace. We miss you. I felt bile rise in my throat as I recognized that voice, a haunting echo from my childhood. The shadows began to shift, forming crystalline shaped spaces, fleeting glimpses of memories long buried. Images of laughter and warmth, deeply intertwined with the sorrow I had fought against, began to surface. But the warmth quickly chilled as the shadows transformed. A girl appeared, her form luminescent yet warped, a blend of beauty and horror. Her eyes glistened like polished obsidian, and her mouth curled into a smile too wide, too sharp. Don't you want to play? She inquired, her tone melding sweetness with something unnameably an insidious invitation that prickled my skin. I couldn't answer. It was as if the very air had thickened, smothering me in dread. Desperate for movement, I grasped at the walls, my fingers brushing against something wet and slick. I recoiled, disbelief crashing against the tidal wave of fear when the shapes began to whisper my name. Lies, they echoed, you abandoned us. The walls pulsed, and I realized they breathed a living coffin encasing the memories of all whom I had wronged. I stepped backward, muttering, no. No, it can't be. Suddenly, the hallway stretched infinitely, the once familiar destinations warping into grotesque parodies of forgotten rooms. I stumbled into what should have been my childhood bedroom, memories flashing like lightning, the scent of lavender, the old clock ticking comfortingly against the wall. But as the chamber materialized around me, it became a grotesque mockery of that sanctuary. Time-worn toys lay shattered amongst the drapes, colored by some sanguine substance that breathed life into this nightmarish tableau. In the corner, a cradle rocked gently, though no wind stirred. I knew instinctively what lay within. The shadows curled lovingly around it, whispering sweet nothingness that filled the air with a sickly warmth. I steeled myself as I approached, each step feeling heavier, an unseen weight anchoring me to the spot. Peering into the cradle, I started. What lay inside was a twisted semblance of a child, its flesh melting into a mass of pulsing misery, eyes wide and unseeing. Each blink revealed sorrow entwined with malice as it muttered words I couldn't quite comprehend. "Mommy, come home." A scream clawed its way up my throat, but I swallowed it, fear morphing into horror-sharp desperation. Behind me, the girl laughed, a clear, piercing sound that twisted my insides. The door to the room slammed shut as if by some unseen hand, isolating my growing terror. "You let us down, but you can fix it," she sang, her form flickering like a faulty bulb. "You must let them in." The words gripped me with ice. Let them in. What lives did they mean? What darkness was waiting at my threshold? I turned to face her, every muscle in my body primed to fight, a primal instinct asserting itself. As if sensing my resolve, the shadows surged, transforming into a maelstrom of swirling thoughts and fears, an eruption of the very wretchedness I had once thought locked away. Faces pressed against the cradle, their mouths forming silent screams, and the air thickened with the weight of their agony. In a breath, she was right before me, her countenance warping from innocence into predation. "Are you brave enough to join us, or will you remain alone, always alone?" The cradle trembled violently, and I grappled with the frayed edge of reality around me. Caught between the world I longed to escape and the tormented specters gnawing at my boundaries, my mind reeled. The walls started to close in, the laughter mingling with the cries of the trapped. In that moment, everything exploded into chaos. The ceiling cracked, light pouring through the fissures like molten silver, illuminating gaping mouths screaming for release. My heart thundered as the shadows lunged. "Choose," the girl shrieked, every word resonating with the pain of the damned. "Will you unleash the darkness, or will you bind it forever?" Just then, the shadows flared, engulfing me, and the room erupted in a scream, echoing into the very fabric of my being. As my resolve shattered, I felt the warmth of the spectral figures seep into me, a connection forging between despair and hope, unknown and dread. Then I knew, the moment of choice was upon me, and as I saw the abyss widen beneath my feet, I felt the pull of darkness called by the voices of the lost. Find the truth before the weight of decision crushed me. I glimpsed a flicker of light, a visage of someone familiar, beckoning like a star through fog. And just as I reached for it, the shadows closed in, and the world went black. I don't know how long I've been floating in this black void. Time has become nothing but a whisper, a vague notion lost among spectral fragments of memory and agony. Every flicker of consciousness feels like plunging headfirst into the memories entwined with darkness, a relentless cycle of horror. But eventually, something shattered the endless monotony. A jarring force jolted me awake, pulling me from the abyssal depths, hurling me back into a body that felt all too familiar. It was a gut-wrenching sensation, like being exhumed from the grave, each nerve twinging with impossibly vivid pain. And then I opened my eyes. I found myself in the dilapidated Wilkins house, the air thick with dust and despair. The walls around me dripped with stagnant shadows, each corner pulsating as if the house itself breathed malevolence. Anxiety tightened in my chest like an iron vice. This place had always been a threshold, a haunting tether binding the lost souls to their torment. I remembered everything, the truth that had clawed at the edges of my sanity till I succumbed to its twisted allure. As I struggled to stand, panic surged through me like ice-cold water. The shadows swirled, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear, yet their chorus felt oddly comforting and familiar. My throat tightened around the memories of my choices, how they had led me into this labyrinthine horror. Each specter that flickered into view the anguished faces of the children who perished, their laughter now twisted into something sinister filled me with dread. I was back at the beginning, entangled in the web of my own reckoning. Suddenly, a high-pitched giggle pierced the suffocating silence. The sound echoed down the hallway, and I felt the air grow heavy with a palpable dread. There she was again, that sinister girl from my dreams. A twisted smile stretched across her face as she stepped out from the shadows, eyes gleaming with a wicked light. "You've finally returned," she chirped, twirling through the dust motes as if they were her plaything. "We've missed you, stay away from me." I spat, each word fueled by a desperate need to break free from the clutches of hopelessness. But even as I spoke, I felt my words crumble into pieces, dissipating like wraiths in the dark. The girl stepped closer, her eyes boring into me, and suddenly I understood. Everything I had fought against, every ounce of defiance, had led me back to this moment. Time had no power here, I was forever bound to the sins of my past, tangled in the suffering of those I had lost. "Help us break the seal," she coaxed, her voice syrupy sweet yet dripping with malice. "You belong here with us. You've always belonged." I recoiled, retreating against the wall that felt colder the more I pressed against it. The shadows grew bolder, swirling toward me, eyes glinting within their murky depths, 1,000 lost souls crying out for recognition. I felt their sorrow latch onto me, an unbreakable chain binding me to their pain. Memories flickered unbidden in the corners of my mind, the laughter of 1,000 lost voices, the cries of innocence stripped bare, the echoes of dreams now turned nightmarish. In that moment, I was consumed by the understanding that it wasn't merely a reflection of my desires. I had opened a door, and the darkness had raced forth, leaving me caught in a vast web where every soul had shared their darkness with me. A part of it resided within me now, their anguish had become woven into my existence. "No!" I screamed futilely, pounding my fists against the unforgiving walls. "I won't be part of this." The shadows recoiled momentarily, and the girl's laughter rang out like bells announcing despair, cutting through my resolve like a sharp knife. "You can't hide. You have been chosen." With that, she lunged at me, and before I could react, darkness enveloped me, forcing me down to my knees, but my will surged, a flicker of defiance igniting deep within. I recalled the faith's never-ending chains of longing, and I remembered a truth I thought I had lost. These souls weren't just here to claim me, they sought solace, a chance to reclaim what had been taken from them. Each had a story just like mine, each had a life that tied back into their ache. Suddenly, the shadows began to shift, coalescing into a figure I recognized, a silhouette from my memories, a long-lost friend who had suffered in the depths. Her eyes traced my own, filled with the recognition of shared trauma. To appease the darkness, we had become pawns, yet together we could rewrite a different ending. "No more games!" I bellowed, the air crackling around me with raw energy. "You are not my master, I will take back what's mine." With a push of will, I reached into the darkness that clung to me like a second skin. I felt the agony and grief within their souls pulsate beneath my touch, their chilling cries igniting a fire within me, the warmth of compassion surging forth, overwhelming the tendrils of despair. Light exploded from within, shattering the shadows. The cacophony of fear splintered and began to dissolve as truth pierced through their anguish. Together I screamed, summoning the strength we could share. The whispers changed, unraveling from despair to hope, a wave of emotion crashing against the walls of the house, shaking its very foundation. As the shadows shrieked, fighting against the wave, I felt a surge of energy blossom in my chest, binding with the essence of every lost soul around me. They didn't want to be defined by their pain, and neither did I. "Find your truth!" I roared, and suddenly I found myself not alone but surrounded by a constellation of flickering lights, the faces smiling as they surged together, converging to take back the night. but as the darkness started to dissolve, a crushing weight bore down on my soul. The room collapsed around me, walls crumbling, yet the tether remained thick and unyielding. The girl's laughter rang wildly amid the chaos, echoing so deeply that the very ground churned with fear. You can never escape what lies within. In an exhaled breath, I was hurled into a sudden transition back and forth like a heartbeat. I felt remnants within me, whispering my name, beckoning me to return. Join us, become one with us, they clamored, and the very essence of the house clawed at my consciousness, ready to pull me back that I resisted, drawing on the flickering embers of flames from those freed spirits that had danced in the light with me. You are my strength, I cried, drawing forth a truth woven in defiance, building an iron wall around my heart. I had a choice to face them, still here entwined in the shadows. Then came a deafening roar as if the house themselves screamed in agony. The moment of reckoning was here. I felt the ground beneath me tremble, and a moment of sheer clarity sprang hold. I could either be imprisoned forever within this cursed realm, or I could forge a new path, freeing the souls enmeshed in darkness. Standing firm, I bellowed, I will be your beacon, your freedom. With that, I prepared to face the lingering dark. And as shadows surged forth, stretching their claws in sensual grace, I focused on each soul behind meth warmth of their hope, igniting something powerful and brilliant. They began to break through dark, forcing the shadows away from me, and in that instant of mutual understanding, I knew everything had changed. A blinding light erupted, a cathartic release flooding through every shackle that had once held us. Together, we embraced the light, pushing against the darkness, the weight of history, the taint of anguish. As the fabric of darkness began to fray at the edges, I could feel the pull of history breaking like chains forged long ago. And then I screamed, we are free. And in that declaration, something profound cracked through layers of despair. A fissure opened, exploding with brightness and hope. Those spectral figures melted away like dew on a sunny morning, leaving me standing tall amidst the ashes of what had once been. The girl's visage wavered, a flicker of recognition glimmering within the finality of death, yet even through that flicker, I was somehow reborn. I stepped through the crumbling threshold toward the light. Strands of shadow dying behind me, whispering a truth that would echo forever. The darkness lingered, though muted now, always just beneath the surface. Because even when we break free, our scars remain, staining the air with bittersweet memories. But as I stepped back into the world, ready to embrace life anew, the haunting whisper lingered in my ear, one last to me, a reminder of a chilling truth I could not escape. You're never truly free from the shadows, they remain your silent companions, and, in that realization, I understood deep down our darkness is not gone but simply waits for a whisper of pain to reveal themselves once more.